So this is my first video of 2022. I hope you guys enjoyed your time off, but it's gonna be crazy over the next week because a lot of laptops are being announced, and I'm gonna try to provide as much insight and information as possible. So make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you wanna be updated. But we're starting with Acer first because they are announcing a brand new Nitro, Predator Helios 300, and Triton 500 SE. And the Nitro 5 has been slightly redesigned. It still has a very similar look to the old one, which I have here, but instead of having these two lines go up the middle, there's about 4 of them with red and blue coloring. The big difference though is that instead of only having a power connector on the back, they're adding more ports there too. This is good because what it does is it keeps your desk cleaner. I talk about this all the time. Instead of having your power and your HDMI on the left or right hand side, which can get in the way of your mouse, they're placing it on the back. Very similar to what Lenovo's doing, who copied it from Alienware. Now there is a lot of ports to be utilized. For example, on the left-hand side, they're gonna be utilizing a RJ45 USB-A headphone jack. On the back, you have that HDMI port, which is 2.1, USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 if you get the Intel model, and there's also an AMD version with the new 6000 series CPUs that will just use regular USB Type-C. And then of course you have the power connector. On the right-hand side, you have an additional 2 USB-A ports. Now, unfortunately, they're still using the same sort of keyboard as this guy right here. It's those rubberized switches that they've been using for years to come. They're okay, but I think it's time for Acer to try something new. I will commend them though, because they're still sticking with a numpad on the 15-inch version, and depending on which Nitro 5 you buy, you can buy it with 1 red backlighting, or you can get 4 zones of RGB. The one thing I did notice though is that the hinge is a bit different. If you notice on the previous version, the connection points are on the outside of the display, so that essentially only allows Acer to tighten it up over here and over here, whereas on the new model, they're moving the hinges a bit inwards, allowing them to tighten them on both sides of the connection points. Now, they're not gonna be giving you a new sort of GPU, right? Like, NVIDIA is announcing a TI version of their 30 series, and you can spec the new version with a 3070 Ti, but you do have the option to buy it with an Intel processor or AMD processor. Now, the Intel processor is gonna be an i7, up to an i7 12th gen CPU, and there's gonna be 2 slots for M2 SSDs, PCIe Gen 4. If you do go with the AMD version, only one of those slots will be Gen 4, the other one will only be Gen 3. Now, the benefit of the AMD version is you get some of that new DDR5 memory. The Intel variant of the Nitro 5 is sticking with DDR4. Not a big deal right now. Like, I'm not seeing a huge performance increase by going to DDR5 on my desktop, so I'm expecting the same thing to happen here too. The funny thing is that the AMD version is actually more expensive, which is really weird because if you think back in history of these gaming laptops, AMD is always the cheaper one. And my gut feeling is the reason why the AMD version is starting out at $1099 instead of $1049 for the Intel version is because of that DDR5 memory. That stuff is still very, very expensive. The display is gonna be QHD, it's 16:9, it's gonna have a 3 millisecond response time, but it's not going to be 16:10. So a very traditional gaming display, and you're not getting the new Wi-Fi 6E, they're sticking with Wi-Fi 6. Now, if you're more comfortable on spending money on a mid-range laptop, you can take a look at the Acer Predator Helios 300. I think it's sharing the exact same chassis as the Nitro 5, because when I look at the pictures of this, the port lineup, the port positioning is exactly the same. There's literally no difference. The one major difference though is that you're getting a blue and gray theme on a black chassis rather than this red and blue thing they're doing on the Nitro 5. Plus you have the option to spec it all the way up to an RTX 3080. Now, the Nitro and the Helios 300 can be spec'd with 32 gigabytes of RAM. My gut feeling is if you really want to, you can upgrade it to 64. Both of these devices can support 2 M2 SSDs, but you can configure the Helios 300 to use RAID 0 for super fast read and write speeds. Now, the benefit of going with the Helios 300 is not only the RTX 3080 that you can get it with, is you get a few more additional features. Like, for example, same sort of keyboard as this guy, but instead of 4 zones, you can now do per key RGB, and they're using this mini LED backlighting system, which is supposed to be a little bit more intense than the traditional RGB we're used to seeing on most laptops. Also on the Predator Helios 300, they're adding a bit of RGB in front of the laptop. They're adding a strip. Again, very similar to what Lenovo's doing. They're taking some of the stuff out of their playbook, but you also potentially have a cooler laptop. Because unlike the Nitro 5, which is using regular thermal paste, the Helios 300 is going to use liquid metal. Now, I know some of you might find this a little bit annoying because yes, liquid metal will technically provide a cooler experience, even if it's not major, but the thing with liquid metal is every year or so, you have to repaste it because it starts to, its efficiency starts to wear off, and that could be cumbersome for someone who's not an enthusiast. And the final Predator they're releasing is the Triton 500 SE. This is gonna start off at $2,300 US, but this is Acer's most premium gaming laptop. In fact, they're actually gearing this towards the gamer/content creator, someone like me. And they're doing this by getting rid of that entire gaming vibe, minus the Predator logo, which is a bit aggressive, but they did shrink it down to the top middle of the lid. This is a thinner laptop. It's a bit more portable. It has the things you want if you plan on traveling, like the bigger 99 watt-hour battery, which is the legal limit if you ever get on a plane, which a lot of us are not doing these days. But if you do, you get the most battery life that you can travel with. Now, this is also using an Intel processor, just like the Helios 300. None of these laptops, except for the Nitro 5, is coming with an AMD version, but the kicker is with the 500 SE, you can spec it with an i9 12th gen processor and up to an RTX 3080. Of course, you can have 32 gigabytes of RAM. You can have that all metal design, 2 terabytes of RAID 0 storage, so it's gonna be nice and fast. It's using their triple fan system and Aero 5th gen blade technology. I mean, come on, let's be honest here. These chips are gonna run hot. I don't care if there's 20 millionth version of the Aero blades, it's gonna need a lot more than that. And just like the Helios 300, it is using liquid metal. But the beauty about this guy compared to the other two is the display. You're getting a much better display. Not only is it QHD, it's 16 by 10. You get a 240 hertz panel instead of 165, but the color accuracy and screen brightness is supposed to be significantly better, like 500 nits, 100% DCI-P3 color spectrum. Like, this is really geared towards that gamer creator. The other thing I noticed is that it's the only laptop out of the three that's offering Wi-Fi 6E, while the other two are only offering Wi-Fi 6. So that's something to consider as well. But you do get a SD card slot, which is 7.0, so you get pretty good read and write speeds. I think this is one of their previous chassis from the concept lineup, but if it can be cooled properly, this could be a good option if you're looking for something a bit more premium. So that wraps up Acer's gaming announcements. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more laptop announcements coming out of CES. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, I'll see you guys in the next one.